Mr. Shoukry, it's my pleasure welcoming you to Raisina 2023 Ideas Pod. Here we debate all the current ideas, what have been discussed in Raisina and what are being discussed outside these rooms as well. So let me begin with your leadership of COP27. I think in many ways COP27 came at an extremely difficult time. It was a challenging time, the world was in turmoil. So before we go into the details of COP27, my first and simple question to you is, because this is Raisina 2023 discussions, which is a conference in geopolitics, my question is, do you feel that climate change has become a victim of geopolitics? Is that where we are headed? Did you get that feeling in COP27? And if that is so, then are we going to see more climate inaction, that is INACION, nothing being done about it, rather than climate action?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you, and I think we have to be practical and objective. COP is a multilateral process which I think is gradually being recognized as a very important vehicle to address what is becoming more and more apparent an existential threat to humanity, the globe, and what it has been witnessing in terms of erratic weather patterns, heat waves, floods, of course, those that happened in Pakistan last year, as well as forest fires in the United States. There's a greater recognition of the potential damage that not dealing with climate change will result in. But at the same time, there has been tendencies, and we recognize that geopolitics has had an effect, especially on COP27 because of the situation in Ukraine, and what we witnessed firsthand in utilizing this as a forum to air views and to lodge criticism. It was very apparent during the subsidiary body meetings in Bonn, where we tried as presidents of COP to isolate as much as we could and to instill upon the participants the importance of concentrating on the issue at hand, and to that there were other forums that are more appropriately concerned with the geopolitical conditions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I think to an extent we were able to isolate COP27 during the leadership segment, the 2 days, the 7th and the 8th, and the convergence of more than 120 leaders who did come and who did concentrate on the issues of climate change and were focused on how they could keep the momentum of multilateral action, climate action, to address the challenges. So there is always a potential that it is affected by geopolitical conditions, but it's up to us to try to gear, as presidents, as participating countries, to try to protect the process because of its nature, because of the momentum that has been created since Paris, and that I think we should maintain. But the other impact has been the relationship between conditions, the war in Ukraine, and energy insecurity or energy security.
Yes. How nations' perceptions about energy security have changed, and that is having an impact on what climate action they're going to take.
Undoubtedly, but I look at it also from the perspective of the potential of backtracking on commitments and utilizing the developments and its impact on energy security as a justification for lack of fulfillment of obligations. Precisely, and lowering the bar of ambition. We've seen countries reverting to the utilization of coal, and this, I think, is a matter that has to be taken into account. At the same time, those who are backtracking on some of their commitments seem to be the most vocal in their ambitions that countries of the South should do more. And here it is the contradiction between ambition and implementation.
Thank you. Now tell me, because of all this, COP27 came at a very difficult time, and yet you managed to achieve something quite significant in COP, which I think were major things. Could you just tell me one or two big things which happened in COP27?
Well, undoubtedly, the issue of the loss and damage fund is the most prominent achievement of COP27, and it comes well overdue after 30 years of constant appeals by the developing world to recognize the lack of resilience and the need for support to address very impactful conditions that have resulted and have affected the lives and livelihoods of multitudes of people. With a lack of a dedicated resource that can address the issues of loss and damage for developing countries, it was always a deficiency in the collective responsibility that the COP process, I think, had highlighted and elevated. So the establishment of the fund, and it was quite a considerable process of negotiations and of elevating the political cost of continuing for some that had been in opposing to show the necessary political will and resolve to fulfill what was progressively becoming a major stumbling block had it not been addressed.
Yes, this was a major victory. Basically, to explain to our audiences, this really opens perhaps the way for possible reparations for damage occurring out of climate change, the possibility of reparations from people who are responsible for the effects of the climate change.
Let me qualify. I think one of the reasons of our success was that we immunized the fund from the legalistic aspects of reparations and accountability, but rather to have concentrated on the actual provision of relief through the fund. The issues of culpability and responsibility from a legal perspective, it is not the area where that can be addressed within the COP process, but rather in other more legally prone forums. So we maintain, and I think that was the main point of success, that from the outset in the negotiations that led to COP27, we did, let us say, finesse the argument and again recognize the points of views of all concerned, especially those who had reservations and who were reluctant, and from the outset in the agenda providing the guarantees that this would not be an instrument of a legal nature, nor is it directed towards the issues of accountability.
Does that also, in a way, make it a hollow victory? Because the fund, the so-called the fund for damages and so on and so forth, is it likely to go the same way as the fund for climate finance has gone, which does not grow?
Potentially, of course. It all depends on the degree of recognition and solidarity and political will that exists. I think any mechanism is prone to succeed or to fail on the degree of commitment and recognition of the justification to provide those funds. And here again, I think one of the main components of success in COP27 is the connection that was made between development and climate action, the connection that was made between ambition and the provision of resources, financial resources, and that there was a discrepancy in the reluctance of countries of the developed world to fulfill their obligations and to provide finance, concessional finance, grants that can enable the developing countries to fulfill their obligations, to decrease their emissions, to work on both mitigation and adaptation, and at the same time recognize that they are not the substantial contributors to the climate crisis. but willing to undertake the responsibilities if they are provided the tools to do so. And as I mentioned in the panel, recognizably, the liquidity is available. During COVID, when resources were all directed to the invention of a vaccine, trillions of dollars were invested in that endeavor. Stimulus packages to maintain economic viability were also provided in the developed world. So the resources are available in the international financial institutions in countries of the North, but they need to be directed. If there is a credible commitment to climate action, then the tools to achieve our objectives have to be also provided in a transparent and effective manner.
So the way the vaccines were developed during COVID and a great effort was made, but when it came to the sharing of vaccines, you could see the pushbacks, and you see there was a lot of vaccine hoarding going on. Now something similar is likely to happen during, if you start talking of political will, that's exactly what will start happening, whether it comes to damage and control, whether it comes to climate finance. So yes, we come back to the question of geopolitics, geoeconomics, but my question is here different. Now what I'm asking is, after COP27, do you feel, after the changes, geopolitical changes which have taken place, the war in Ukraine, priorities of countries changing, is there a possibility that today common and the idea of common and differentiated responsibility is back there in the agenda with far greater force than it was in the past?
Well, this was highlighted during COP27, and it was one of the issues that we were very sensitive that should not be brushed under the carpet as many had desired. And we maintain that this is an important element. It is a matter of maintaining the commitment and the recognition that was made initially that there are differentiated responsibilities and commitments, and that the only way forward is that recognition. We cannot equate and create a situation that would be deemed as unjust, were we to totally negate the century of emissions that have resulted in prosperity and development for states, and then try at this stage to deprive others from their God-given right to provide the aspirations of their peoples and have them catch up in terms of better standards of living for their populations. So it is the balance, and it is the commitment and the recognition that those who have more should do more, and those who have less should be provided the opportunity and the resources and the technology. One of the issues also of achievements in COP27 was the relationship between the climate crisis and the issue of peace and security and conflict prevention, that there was a definite correlation between the climate challenge and the conflicts at a regional, and we can expect an interregional and even global dimension if we don't face the necessity of the issues of water scarcity, just transition of energy, and also the resources to deal with the various challenges.
So basically, I think where we are heading is the discussion, the COP discussion now is moving into the real areas of how inaction on climate becomes a kind of insecurity of nations, affects food, fertilizer, affects, starts affecting migration, and therefore needs to be given priority as a security problem. So is that a gain? And do you think, and this is my last question, as you see, as the COP28 leadership passes on to the United Arab Emirates, what is it that is now on the table? What would you like to see moving forward happening in the subsequent COPs?
Well, again,
after the gains you've made in COP27.
It is the recognition that we all have to depend on the science, and that we all have to be motivated by a recognition that we are all in this together, and that only through joint action can we address what is truly an existential threat to the globe and to future generations, that it is this generation's responsibility to deal with these issues in a fair and equitable and impactful manner, recognizing the parameters, recognizing the ability and taking the necessary steps and measures to be able to jointly participate in this endeavor. There have been achievements in recognizing the deficiencies in the financial systems and in the obligations that were agreed. For example, the 100 billion. What is 100 billion? It's a minuscule
but
sum.
But even that is not coming.
That is the complexity and the ironic nature of when we address an existential issue and then are deficient in fulfilling such a meager obligation, whereas trillions are needed. Also, it is important that we maintain the focus on the multilateral governmental nature of the COP process. There have been calls, and we recognize that the other stakeholders, private sector, NGOs, civil society, they all have an important role to maintain the momentum. But at no stage should we deflect the responsibility on governments to be able to regulate, to be able to contribute, and to be able to motivate the other stakeholders. Certainly, the move towards renewable energy and the economic benefits associated with it, and the innovation and the need to move forward is important, and that can be undertaken by the private sector. But there will always be an important role for governments in terms of regulation, in terms of guarantees that would open doors of investment towards the developing world that is still struggling to find the necessary resources, and that governmental relationship is the means to open some of those doors.
So last question, and a quick one, just 30-second answer I want. So do you think now at COP27 or at G20, these other multilateral forums which we're having, the Global South today has a stronger voice? What is your experience?
Its voice is elevated, certainly because it is the Global South that is more impacted by current conditions, geopolitical conditions, economic and their consequences on the economies. So necessarily, since we are suffering the most, then it is only reasonable that our voices should now be more impactful.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was an excellent discussion, and I'm sure the audience are going to enjoy this as much as I have done. It's a pleasure having you here at the Raisina Ideas Pod. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.